Once we've gotten the one arm swing, the swings with the rotation, now we can start taking the kettlebell laterally. So still keeping in that frontal plane. We're not going to be rotating typically with it until we get to that end range, but the bell is going to be staying in front of us. Okay, so we're going to be adding in a little bit of folding, a little bit of sagittal plane, but then again, back into frontal plane. And then as we start to add in that rotation, we're hitting all the planes. And that's, again, what makes this movement and what makes these movements with the kettlebell so powerful is being able to go back and forth into these multi-directional patterns, into all the planes, but be strong and connected in each one. All right, so as we go into this, we're going to start off with some low lateral leg drivers. With these lateral leg drivers, we're kind of going back to those leg drivers where we're staying in that hinged position, but rather than keeping that bell in front of us, we're going to bring that bell side to side. So what we want to avoid here is leaning side to side with the bell. We don't want to come moving, shifting our body weight. We want to root ourselves to the ground. We want to root our hips to our trunk. We want to root everything together so that way we're not going to lean. Okay, all we're going to do is shift our weight. So the same way that we did this hip tilt back and forth, and you see how everything builds on itself. Everything comes back around, and there's a reason for every piece that was put into this program for you. So same way we did this, but now all we're doing is we're adding the hinge. Okay, does that make sense? So an easy way I like to think about this is like to think of your feet and your knees on a set of train tracks. As we're on these train tracks, the knees can slide, but they can't break across. We can't go across these train tracks. They have to stay in line. And what you'll notice is as long as your feet are in line and then your knees are in line, your hips will be in line and things won't cross over. So we want to avoid any kind of rotation into these positions. It's all gonna be nice and parallel to each other. Now, notice what happens to your upper body as you do this. From that hinge position, when you get into these knee drivers, you start to see a bit of a shift with the upper body. Now, if you just let your arms hang and do this, notice what happens. We're getting this rotation in this position. And this is what's going to open us up for rotational swings, for outside leg rotation swings. Okay, where we're going to add that rotation. We're bringing that hinge. Remember, we're not flexing, so we're not letting the spine completely fold, but we are adding a hinge with rotation rather than flexing and adding rotation and thus putting a lot of stress on the spine. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start again with a very subtle movement and then expand out as we feel more and more comfortable with it. We'll get the bell into a hinge. So we're going to have our feet fairly close together, slightly narrower than hip width. Once we're in this position right here, we're going to get into the hinge and we're just going to go side to side. Okay? We're only going to go right outside the foot, right outside the other foot, back and forth. So from here, we're just going to go side to side so that we're really focusing on building that front line engagement. So keeping that tension through the core, keeping that tension through the glutes, through the lower back to make sure the spine stays safe as we start to add that shift. So we're going to go a little bit further, and then once we feel comfortable, we're going to let go and add that extension. So now let's talk about that extension before we do it weighted. Number one, with a competition bell, they're a little bit wider. So we have to make sure that we clear the knees, clear the shins as we come across the body. So I only want you to go as high as you feel comfortable until you can go a little bit higher and a little bit higher. On that top position, regardless of the transition from the ground or from that hang to that elevated position, we're always maintaining that shoulder connection. The shoulder is connected to the body. So even as we come across, we're always keeping that connection to the lat. We're not allowing for an extension at that top position or where it disconnects from the joint. Okay, so we're going to go back and forth, and we'll just go a little bit higher, keeping both hands on the bell until we get to about quad height, thigh height. Then we'll go a little bit higher, and then we'll take off the hand to the bell. So let's start. We'll go side to side. Going a little bit higher. So notice I'm staying hinged. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to let go and stand up and then come right back into it. Stand up, right back into it. So the driver is still going to be the glute. Oh, that's pretty close. The driver is still going to be the glutes as I come up. When I get to that standing position, even though I'm not driving that force directly out in front of me, I'm bringing it out to the side, I'm still going to focus on driving the glutes. Okay? So as I come up, we're going to go 2, 3, and on the third, we're going to rise up and then come back across the body. So we're always going to come back to those two-hand low-level pendulums, lateral pendulums, so that way you feel the control. So again, similar to what we did with the single rep swings, we'll chunk them into bite-sized pieces. So that way, rather than just going through the motion and you'll figure it out as you go along, we're trying to ease you into these movements. All right, let's do it again. So we're from that hang, 1, 2, 3, up, 1, 2, 3, up, 1, 2, 3, up. So at that top position, I'm going to be in a slight rotation with my trunk. I'm not going to be completely square because that's going to open me up to potentially slamming my leg. So I'm in a slight rotation, but I'm still going to be completely engaged from the glutes, from my midline. So keep everything engaged and then come right back down. So once I've got that mastered, I'm ready to go. Now I can add in some rotational swings from without stopping. So continuous rotational swings. These are fun, and they put a lot of pressure on your lower back if you haven't done all the stuff that I know you haven't skipped as you got to this point. You've been doing it all along. You're feeling that connection. You're feeling that engagement. And now, once we've gotten to this point, you're feeling that connection, especially from the rib cage to the pelvic area. So that way, we're always staying nice and tight. All right, so we'll do a couple reps. 1, 2, 3. And now we're going to just repeat continuous motion. It's crossing the body. Notice how my feet and my knees are facing the same direction. They're not buckling in. My shoulders engaged. I'm going to switch, and I'm going to do the other arm. I don't like to do one arm on the low end of this because you can't really get that torque to rotate back and forth. So grab on with two hands and then repeat. So you can alternate with these. And this is a great movement if you have golfers, if you have anybody that needs powerful rotation and learn how to maintain tension but build explosion from that hinge. So that was the swing section. There's a lot that went into that, and you can see how it all builds on itself. So from as simply as performing the breath work, to the mobility work, to the hinge, to the deadlift, to all that, then you leads up to this, and now we can go back and we can play around with the different pieces. And then we can find different alternatives that will support whatever you are trying to accomplish with yourself and with your client. So don't neglect any of those. Practice them all, incorporate them all into your training, and then master them so that way we can go into more and more creative flows.